Hello, welcome to the debate on Sky News. I'm Martin Stanford. Here's our take on developments brought together from America, the UK and around the world. More of the same as Bibi's back for a third straight term as Israel's leader.
Against all odds, a great victory for Likud. I've spoken with all party leaders of the national camp. I've asked them to join me and form a government in Israel without delay. Reality doesn't take a break. Israeli citizens expect us to form a responsible leadership quickly that will work for them. And this is what we'll do.
Pakistan in terror turmoil. Thousands attend funerals after more Taliban suicide bomb attacks. And logging out of Internet Explorer after 20 years. Benjamin Netanyahu has been called a magician after his election win this week. But at what cost? Has Mr Netanyahu's apparent lurch to the right created even more divisions within Israel and throughout the international community? In a moment, we'll speak to Ambassador Maen Areikat, the Palestinian ambassador to Washington. But as usual, the Democrat commentator, Jeffrey Robinson, is in New York, standing by for us there, and the Conservative commentator, Armstrong Williams, is in Washington, D.C. Armstrong, you're not surprised about this win, right?
Oh, absolutely not. Obviously, the world media, including the New York Times and the Washington Post, had its own narrative. It's no different than the narrative of President Barack Obama and other leaders who actually wanted to see the demise and the defeat of Netanyahu because they thought he was a thorn in their side, especially when it comes to these Iranian negotiations. But the people of Israel, who did not blame Netanyahu for the fractured relationship, they understood that no matter how, with his arrogance or whatever you may want to call it, he cared about Israel. He would defend it at all costs. And I don't think what they're saying, what he said in terms of the Arab vote at the last minute and anything else, it's what you do in politics. It's no different than what Obama and others have done to win. And I think the people of Israel have spoken, and we need to respect it and move on.
Jeffrey Robinson, for the rest of the world, what happens now?
Well, less than half the people of Israel have spoken. Don't forget this is a minority government. The fact is that the polls were so wrong. That I found the most astonishing thing at all. And I credit Armstrong. He was very right. The problem is that Netanyahu, during the campaign, locked himself really into the corner when he talks about the U.S.-Iranian negotiations over nuclear weapons, when he talks about the Palestinian state. He's not going to favor a two-state solution, and the Israeli settlements. In other words, he's locked himself into a corner and out of step with most of the rest of the world. What happens now is there's not a lot of wiggle room. Now, when you have a minority government, the benefit is that there is always room for compromise. That's how they survive. Mr. Netanyahu might not have that room. And the downside of a minority government is that it can topple. If he annoys the wrong people, he's gone. So whether or not he lasts the full parliamentary term, I don't know. But he certainly has put himself at odds with much of the rest of the world, and especially the United States.
Well, let's bring in the ambassador now to Washington. That's Maen Areikat. Ambassador, thank you for being with us today. Now, what's your reaction to the news that Mr. Netanyahu looks likely to stay in charge for the next few years?
I think it's an internal decision. You know, we have said all along that the Israelis are entitled to choose whoever they want to choose to represent them. What matters to us is not who will be the next prime minister, but rather whether Israel will finally become accountable or become accountable and adhere to international law and accept the international community position on resolving the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. This is what matters to us. I don't care who will be the next Israeli prime minister. Evidently, the mask has been taken off. Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that he will not support the Palestinian state. And this will be a major disagreement, not only with the United States and the Palestinians, but also with the rest of the international community who favor a two-state solution.
By which I imagine you must be very pessimistic today, facing the prospect of the possibility of other leaders or a grand coalition which might have been more amenable to having conversations with the Palestinians. You've now got a leader who said once again there is going to be no two-state solution. That must be very depressing.
Well, it's been depressing for quite some time. You know, this is nothing new to Israeli politics. And the fact that this future Israeli government will publicly now declare that they are not committed to two-state solution means that we don't have an Israeli partner. And therefore, this whole bilateral process that the United States and the international community wanted us to be engaged in is no longer valid. I think this is an opportunity for the international community, including the United States, to support Palestinian efforts to take this issue to the United Nations, to international organizations. It's time to admit that the bilateral process has failed.
Armstrong Williams, let me bring you back in, if we may. This is going to be a problem for the American government of any hue and an American president of any hue over the coming years, isn't it?
No different than what we faced before. Look, I know it sounds all rosy and reasonable for the ambassador to talk about a two-state solution, but listen, the Palestinians for so many decades have had every opportunity to have this own Palestinian state. They've been offered and re-offered. It has never happened. To try to lay the blame about that at the feet of Netanyahu is not fair, and the ambassador knows that's not absolutely accurate. The bottom line, the situation, if these Palestinians are reasonable, if they come to the table with reasonable compromises and adhere to the agreements that have been laid out in the past, and they show some reasonableness, I am certain as Netanyahu and leaders of the past are more than willing to try to join forces with the Palestinians and with people all throughout the Middle East to try to find some solution to this conflict. And I think what is lost in this conversation is also, I don't think there are some Arab states like Egypt and Saudi Arabia who are altogether disappointed that Netanyahu won again, because I think many of them agree with him on the issue of the threat of Iran and the threat of ISIS. And while they may not agree with him on other issues, they think that you need a person of strength, that these people realize who's not weak, will not back down, and will operate with whatever means necessary to defeat the enemy that surrounds them all in the Middle East.
Jeffrey, it rather means America's influence with Israel is zero, if not in negative territory right now, doesn't it? They know the Americans have been supporting a two-state solution. They beg the Israelis not to keep building houses, and they just go on with it.
No, America's influence is not zero. It is still what it is because there is still military cooperation, and the Israeli lobby in Congress is still very strong. The United States will always defend Israel. It's not about the two men. It's not about Mr. Obama and Mr. Netanyahu. But what the problem is, and I agree with Armstrong, that the ambassador's interpretation of history is slightly myopic. I mean, we have to consider the fact that Hamas and Hezbollah have strong political influence in Palestine. And I wonder what he says to the typical American comment that the Palestinians throughout these talks for 30 years or 40 years have never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity.
Ambassador?
It's very interesting that I have a couple of gentlemen here who agree on twisting the facts and twisting the truth. The first gentleman is asking me to be optimistic and reasonable about the prospect of a government in Israel that will include a minister who called for the beheading of Arabs if they are not loyal for Israel. Lieberman said that. Naftali Bennett, who is calling for preventing a Palestinian state at any cost. And then another prime minister who relied on fear-mongering, racism, to compel his supporters to go to vote. What kind of reasonableness am I supposed to expect from this Israeli government? Secondly, I am not going to blame Netanyahu, nor to blame the United States, nor anyone else. We, as a Palestinian leadership, have embarked on a political, diplomatic campaign, and we will continue that campaign. We will take the issue to the international organizations, to the United Nations, where it all started in 1947. Let's take it back to the UN, and we will have the United Nations and international organization decide how to hold Israel accountable.
Yeah, but Ambassador, can I just interject? Israel has received instructions from the UN. It's been the subject of many UN resolutions. It just ignores them. Why do you have any optimism it'll do anything different next time?
Well, because in the past, and thanks to Western U.S. efforts, none of these resolutions that were adopted by the United Nations had teeth, and they were all ignored by Israel with complicity by many Western countries, including the United States. This is not going to continue. We will continue with our strategy as agreed by our leadership. They will convene tomorrow. We will become official members of the ICC on April 1st, and we will continue this nonviolent political diplomatic effort to make Israel understand and to make the supporters of Israel understand that the continuation of this ugly, brutal Israeli military occupation cannot go on. Israel must be held accountable. Israel cannot be above the law. Israel must understand that there will be consequences if they want to continue with their policy of planting not houses, with all due respect to you, but illegal settlement buildings in the Palestinian territories. And therefore, unless they adhere to international law, accept a peaceful resolution to the conflict, they will be held accountable.
Thank you, Ambassador, for the moment. Jeffrey, do you think the UN can fix this?
No, of course not. The UN's tried. The Palestinians don't want to fix it. This is the tail wagging the dog. Mr. Ambassador, when Hezbollah and Hamas stop influencing the political settlement, maybe you'll get one.
Warmongering, this is not going to pay off. The real issue in Israel, it's their conflict with the Palestinian people. We are the only party that can provide Israel with security, peace, and stability. It's not Iran, it's not Pakistan, it's not ISIS. We are on the same land. Unless they make peace with us, they will not enjoy peace and security.
But you haven't done anything. You've missed every opportunity to miss an opportunity, characteristically since 1948.
This is what Abba Eban said. Abba Eban, you are only repeating old slogan. You are fixated on the past. And this is the problem of this current Israeli leadership.
Okay, Mr. Ambassador, thank you for the moment. Let me just ask Armstrong. Let's look ahead, Armstrong, because we've got to the world now has got to try and live with this dynamic. It is said, I know it's a simple piece of analysis, that if Israel, Palestine would only get a better relationship, a lot of the fury that is invoked by ISIS and people like them may well dissipate. So is it not in the world's interest to try and get peace between these two nations?
Well, let's not forget that ISIS is also killing Arabs and Palestinians. It's just not limited to Jews and Christians around the world. In fact, more Arabs and Muslims have died than anybody else in this battle with ISIS, Al-Qaeda. Listen, there's always a solution. You never want to underestimate the relationships that even the ambassador in his country has with Israel and other power brokers in the Middle East. I mean, obviously, the people who fare worse because there's no solution are the everyday people who continue to suffer and not have the best of services. And I think it's only fair if the ambassador, while you may talk about Israel and what they should do and talking about beheading, you should also talk about the fact that when Hamas and Al-Qaeda and these terrorists strike at Israel and other Jews and Christians who are in that part of the world, is celebrated, it's applauded.
Ambassador, answer that point, if you will, and give me one positive outlook as we look at this result this week.
But first of all, the big dollars we get from the United States do not compare to the billions of dollars that Israel gets officially and not officially from supporters in this country. In any case, I speak on behalf of the PLO. There is no cabinet member of this current Palestinian Authority who called for the beheading of Israelis or anybody. So I only can speak on behalf of the PLO and the current Palestinian leadership. Secondly, we have made so many steps in the past in order to reach a historical reconciliation with Israel. We said we want a two-state solution, West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem as its capital, 22% of what used to be historical Palestine. And yet, people who are today taking part in this discussion are asking us to compromise, make more concessions. I think what they are asking us to do is to surrender and to give up and tell this current Israeli government that we no longer want to be free, live in dignity and independence. This is not going to happen. The only solution to this is the creation of a Palestinian, independent Palestinian state. We have recognized Israel and its right to exist, and it's time for Israel and its government to publicly, unequivocally acknowledge that the Palestinian people are entitled for their own state and they need to declare that they are willing to end their military occupation of the Palestinian people.
Ambassador Maen Areikat, thank you very much for joining us from Washington. Now, a reminder, you can always watch the Sky News debate on Apple TV, on Roku and Catch Up, and of course at skynews.com/US. Next, political leaders and senior police officers joined thousands as mourners of Pakistan's Christian community buried their dead. Suicide bombers blew themselves up at 2 churches in Lahore last Sunday. These are no longer isolated attacks. Pakistan is in turmoil. Verbal assaults are being replaced increasingly by terror attacks. Well, let's go to Karachi and talk to Saman Jafri. She's a senior member of the Pakistan Parliament for MQM. Their headquarters were raided by masked gunmen from Pakistan's Rangers force last week. Did anyone explain why they needed to raid your headquarters?
See, Muttahida Qawmi Movement is a party which is a genuinely party which represents people from grassroots. It has given the leadership, a genuine leadership from the grassroots, educated and hardworking middle class people in Pakistan in a very stuffed atmosphere and outmoded but still very powerful feudal structure. And the accusations that we face, they come mostly from our detractors. And we believe that MQM should not be seen as a party defined by our detractors or our opponents. It should rather be seen as the liberal, progressive party which stands for the global values and which stands for the rights of minorities and women, as I said. And this is not a hidden secret that Muttahida Qawmi Movement has been the boldest voice against the Talibanization and IS in Pakistan. We have lost more than 585 workers and 4 sitting MPs just for this bold voice that we raise on regular basis. And they should not be forgotten when you are talking about or when you're mentioning the Muttahida Qawmi Movement.
Let me bring in Jeffrey Robinson and Armstrong Williams now, who are still with us, of course. Jeffrey, I know it's a ghastly world out there, but should we be shocked that suicide bombers attacked worshippers while they're in church?
We should certainly be appalled because it's an appalling act. But this kind of violence is increasing in Pakistan. I mean, we're talking about a nuclear power of 173 million people. We're talking about a very big, important country. But we're talking about a country where the politics of the country, the day-to-day politics, are run by a paranoid military who see everything through the lens of the India problem. I mean, all the military worries about is India. Now, the United States has given Pakistan something like $10 billion, $6 billion of which was to go to the problem in the federally administrated tribal areas along the border, ostensibly to fight the jihadis. And America is starting to ask itself, because of what's going on in Pakistan in this crumbling state, whether or not we've been built. And I'm one of those people who thinks we probably have been.
Do you think America has been had, Armstrong? Its money down the drain?
Of course, there's not much to show for the investment. But, Pakistan is pretty complicated. I think it was ever since Musharraf resigned and stepped away. I mean, Jeffrey makes an interesting point that needs to be talked about a little more. The military was in control of this place for almost 6 to 7 years. And all of a sudden, they're trying to go to what they call is the democracy. And as our guest mentioned, there's this emerging middle class. And then there's this thing of the Christian community, a very small minority, where these militants attack them because they see them as the problem.
Is it the case that this is the growing pains of a fledgling democracy? Or is it that people don't actually want a democracy really at all?
See, you need to understand that the problem in Pakistan right now is extremism. The root cause is extremism, which is a chronic issue. And of course, the sectarianism or terrorism, such as your guest mentioned about the appalling attack on the Christian community on 2 churches on Sunday, or be it the attacks on the Shiite community, or be it on the Peshawar Army Public School, which happened on December 16th. These are all the symptoms of the chronic issue that is extremism. And after the APS attack, the attack on Army Public School, the the democratic forces, they all came up together and unanimously passed the 21st Amendment. I'm not saying that there are no problems in Pakistan. Of course, there are a lot of problems in Pakistan, but I'm also saying that people like me, who are from this very generation, who are in parliament and who are sure of ourselves that we will be bringing Pakistan back on the track. I'm not only hopeful, I'm sure that now there has been a unanimous consensus among the public against the Taliban, against the IS, against the Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, and all these factions which are creating these kind of issues and this kind of situation in Pakistan. I have firm belief, I can assure you, that Pakistan will be back on track soon. Of course, it's a long war.
You take the point, do you, that the world's patience is being tested?
I do, and I do respect the senior people, journalists sitting in your program. I would just like to say that nations do not, the governments do not make nations, people make nations. And after the attacks on Army Public School, after the attacks on the churches, after the attacks on the minorities of Pakistan, the people have had enough. And until and unless a party like the Muttahida Qawmi Movement, the liberal, progressive, secular party, which has been the most blunt voice against Talibanization and IS, until and unless they have representation, until and unless they are the third largest political parties in the parliament, I am still sure of it. I'm sure of all of this, and the National Action Plan that has been created and that is in the process of being implementation is something that is to look forward to. I am not disagreeing that the situation in Pakistan is bad. Of course, it's bad, and that is why we have to take the measures that we are taking right now. But once again, as long as people like me, as long as the leaders like my party, as long as the representation from the people of Pakistan is there, who are rooting for parties like Muttahida Qawmi Movement, who are liberal, progressive, anti-Taliban, anti-IS, and for the people of Pakistan, my hope is not lost. In fact, I'm sure that we will win this long war.
Saman Jafri, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Now, 20 years ago, a revolution was underway. The internet was evolving. Windows 95 was the system to have, and Microsoft published the first version of Internet Explorer. Look at the nostalgia of all the various editions there. After 9 reincarnations, IE has apparently had its day. Well, let's check in with Jeffrey, who's in New York, and of course Armstrong in Washington. Jeffrey, let me guess, I don't think you're an IE kind of guy.
No, not at all. Never have been. Never liked Internet Explorer. I've always liked Firefox. In fact, Mozilla I thought still use it. Is a great program. And there's so many to choose from now, especially with Google Chrome, Opera, Safari. There's a whole host of them. But I've always likened Internet Explorer to the Romans who came into Europe and bullied and pillaged. I mean, when they came along, when they came along, Netscape had 80% of the market, and they simply tore through all the other Netscape users and actually said to many sites, you either switch to us and we're only available on Internet Explorer, or we'll cut you off completely. And there were banks and things who wouldn't let you do any sort of financial stuff except on Internet Explorer. So I never liked them because they're uncompromising. And it's interesting that computerworld.com, in announcing the death of Internet Explorer, had a headline that said, Internet Explorer is no more, it has ceased to be. And just under it, they had video footage of Monty Python's Dead Parrot sketch. You know, what's wrong with it? It's dead. And that sums it up.
Well, you know, in a sense, I'm not sure if it is actually. Microsoft, if they were here, would probably say they're going to reconvene it in some other way. But Armstrong, let me guess that I don't think you were an IE fan either, right?
Oh yeah, it was the only thing I used, and when it was the best. But you know, the world has changed 20 years later, and let us not forget, about 3 years ago, Internet Explorer had these severe hackers, and the bug which they never fully recovered from. And I don't know if you remember the constant updates from IT, and it was costing these people a ton of money. And so obviously they had to make a change. And even Internet Explorer cannot even compete with the things that Google offers, like the emails, the Google Maps, the drives. Even you have the Google car ads now, it just cannot keep up. And it's just loaded with too much. And the biggest thing is it was losing so much money that they could not even justify it any longer. I wasn't surprised when Jeffrey mentioned that he liked Firefox, because I know you can hear and feel him breathing fire when you hear the name Fox. So I just knew Firefox would be his favorite, and Mozilla at that. So, Jeffrey, thank you for being consistent.
Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen. I must close this particular browser for today. A reminder that the debate can be seen, as the rest of Sky News, on Apple TV, on Roku, on Catch Up, and, of course, on skynews.com/US. Until the next time, goodbye.